but just to set the context, I'm assuming we all have just had a chance to look at the latest report by IPCC on the first working group, which establishes that the human influence on climate change is unequivocal, unprecedented, and irreversible, which is different from the previous AFI report, which said that the human influence was highly likely. So it has gone to unequivocal. There is no debate about the human influence on climate change. So science has never been as clear as this. This might be the last warning which we would receive in time to make any change to our impact on climate. And it's time that we really get going on changing the narrative about talking about what we need to do to actually getting to it. And that's where this project comes in. So without much ado, before I get you all to the nitty-gritty of the project, I would like to invite Mr. Bernard Ray, Head of Cooperation Delegation of the European Union to South Africa, to introduce the Climate Change Champions Program.
Well, good afternoon to everyone and all participants, all colleagues. I hope you can see me well. I'm very happy to be here today and demonstrate somehow that the EU walks the talk on two important points for our cooperation internationally: climate and civil society. And maybe I will give it's a long journey you have gone through, and I will recap it and provide it maybe a wider picture. The EU is cooperating in South Africa on a wide range of issues, and since the advent of democracy, we show our solidarity on shared values, on common interests to promote peace, security, democracy, good governance. And the climate change is a challenge which has really come upwards recently. And we wanted to mobilize our strong ties with South Africa on the climate change and for a just and green recovery together with South African partners. So the project we are launching today, the Climate Ambition to Accountability Project, is one of 5 projects under what we call the Climate Change Champions. And this is a program which was launched in December at the end of 2019, exactly 2 days after the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, launched the European Green Deal. And through the Green Deal, the EU has committed to become the first economy to achieve zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. And the Green Deal, contrary to many wisdoms, is a growth strategy. And the idea is to maintain growth, but decouple it from resource use. And on this issue, the transition, and that's what the President said, the transition must work for all, or it will not work at all. So in the international dimension of the Green Deal, we launched a number of programs, and we are currently starting our new budget for 7 years, and we shall commit 30% of the total investments of international development to climate change. So, and that we do with our member states under what we call the Team Europe, because we are actually following the European Union and the European Union member states the same targets on carbon neutrality. And on 5th of June 2021, about a year ago, we launched the Climate Change Champions Program. We had announced it in December, we launched it, and a call of proposal. And we partner with 15 civil society organizations in 5 projects to ensure that in South Africa, no one is left behind in the fight against climate change. So all these 5 actions will contribute to the South Africa NDCs on mitigation and adaptation under the Paris Agreement. And bravo, congratulations to WWF South Africa and its partners, SACAN, the Institute for Economic Justice, for putting together a winning project and being one of those 5 successful projects. You have already started your work. You have already made submissions for the South Africa draft NDC and the Presidential Climate Change Coordination Commission. And we are in the delegation really looking forward the project achievements of this project and wishing you all the best of luck, and thank you again for organizing this launching event. Thanks a lot for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Ray. Thank you for your kind words and thanks for the encouragement to the team. We are looking forward to the exciting journey. May I now invite Louise Naude from WWF South Africa to give a welcome note on the topic, and also just to introduce Louise also serves and represents WWF on the Presidential Climate Commission. Louise, over to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Prabhat. Is my video on?
Yes, it is.
Okay. I can't see it, I think, because you're sharing your screen, but that's fine, as long as you can all see it. Okay, so good afternoon, colleagues, comrades, and sisters. And for me, it's some words to welcome you at the launch of this project and to perhaps locate the project a little bit in the landscape. So in South Africa, it's in our DNA, in our bones, that we work with the idea of social compacts, which is when government, business, labor, and civil society can come around a table, metaphorically or actually, and reach common agreements, which one of the comrades in the labor movement says to me, it doesn't always mean that you walk away with what you might have wanted, but you walk away with what you can feel comfortable with for your constituency. So, and if we are taking a social compact approach in this country, that really does need a very strong civil society voice. And I think in South Africa, we do have quite a mobilized civil society under different formations, and I'll speak about that a bit later. Just to say that the Presidential Climate Commission also is expected to come out with a social compact around the just transition. So, it's manifesting there as well. So I want to use, I don't know how many of you know George Monbiot. He's a writer on environmental and social issues and a speaker and so on. Anyway, he says that human beings use stories to make sense of the world for ourselves. And he says there's one sort of story template that is called the restoration story, that he thinks, we need a new restoration story for the current crises that we are facing, foremost among them climate change. So the restoration story goes like this. There is disorder afflicting the land, and nefarious and powerful forces are obstructing progress. So I'm going to pause there and talk about those powerful and nefarious forces. So I think all around the world, we know that there are those companies with very strong vested interests in the current carbon intensive, energy systems and other economic activities that also depend heavily on creating greenhouse gas emissions. And this is true in South Africa. I've been in the policy space since, 2009. And all along, these vested interests are pushing back on ambition. So that needs civil society and others to push for greater ambition, as your project calls for. And so they limit ambition and they cause delay. And that is, really the strongest factor, I think, that has held us back. And these vested interests, they have allies in government and so on as well. So we're up against powerful and nefarious forces. But what is needed, therefore, is a groundswell from below, from subnational government level, from businesses and from civil society. And what has kind of been missed in this whole picture is this very powerful and united civil society voice. I'm not saying that we aren't there, that we organized in different formations, that we've been doing good work, but that kind of united, visible and strong voice is needed to swell up and stand up against the nefarious forces. Okay, then the story continues. It says, heroes restore harmony in the land. So that is, what we would hope. And let me talk about the heroes a little bit. So there are those in business, there are those in government who are pulling in the right direction. I can talk more about those if wanted, but really what I'm here to say is, that although there might be heroes in business and in government going in the right direction, the voice for justice in that transition comes only from civil society and labor. It's not the business of business to worry about justice. It's, government in some senses should worry about justice, but unless there are these strong voices from labor and civil society, I don't think we can guarantee justice in the process. So that is a responsibility we bear. And then within civil society, I want to say that, who will really strongly stand up for justice in that spectrum is women, because, we understand the nature of oppression, of being treated as second class. So we will stand up for gender justice for everyone, not just for women. But, those are powerful voices. And then, of course, youth who have to carry this fire into the future. It's important. And so it's really good that the project focuses, particularly on those constituencies and those groups. Then I'll just speak a little bit about the opportunities facing you and close with a comment. So there are opportunities in the policy space, and I must say that one of the things that has hampered civil society being strongly interventionist in the policy space is that often the kind of technical jargon and technicalities are used to obscure issues, and it keeps us out. And so I do think it's really important that the project is going to empower people to actually be able to engage with that stuff. You don't have to drown yourself in it. It can all be explained in plain language. But, when somebody wants to counter ambition and pull it down through some technical stuff, one has to be able to say, actually, that is not that accurate, and have that at your fingertips. Again, it doesn't have to be in every single climate activist, but among us, we need those activists who can engage with that. So on that sort of the more technical side, there's a mitigation system coming, which is going to give a carbon allowance to every company that emits above a certain level of emissions. And it is really crucial that that mitigation system come out correct. At the moment, the way it's being designed, it's basically going to give those who have historically emitted a bigger share of the allowable emissions going into the future. So, which is not helpful. The carbon tax is being revised. So that's a place for, and then the climate change bill is going to hit Parliament fairly soon. And then on the accountability side, there's lots of programs in government that are seeking to implement some of the sort of ambition policy dimensions. For example, there's a green transport strategy from the Department of Transport. The Department of Trade, Industry and Competition is developing master plans. And the minister just instructed that everybody's key performance indicators must include green dimensions. So those are all arenas for, holding government accountable, holding ourselves accountable, looking for opportunities. And then there is the Presidential Climate Commission. And I encourage us as a civil society movement to keep the pressure on there, to knock on those doors and to make our voices heard there. And there are allies for that within the commission. And then, of course, I think Prabhat is telling me my time is over. Noted, Prabhat. So I will end with this. I think that it's really important that this project be a vehicle. It's not the only intervention or the only initiative, but it holds the potential to be a vehicle for civil society to develop a minimum platform that everybody can agree on, that we all can rally around and build, that movement and that groundswell from below. And then, I've long been an activist, one of my incarnations, and I've always thought, what really builds unity? And my answer to that is you build unity when you do things together, not just when you talk. And that kind of unity in action, I think this project holds, is one arena of action where we can build that unity together. Thank you, Prabhat.
Thank you, Louise, for that incisive overview and intervention. And I think that the last point which you made, especially that, how do you build unity? Not, by doing things together, that's really going to be the heart and soul of the project, through which, we are going to incentivize and create avenues where different organizations, different networks, different people can come together to collaborate on issues which really should be prioritized. And so I would like to now, before I start the presentation and overview, maybe I can request Kingiwe, who is going to, all of you would get in touch with her at due course of time, and she would reach out to you. She would be playing an important role in this project and has just joined us last month as the Secretariat and Activities Coordinator. So can I request Kingiwe to put up the first poll question? And we can give a minute for everybody to respond to that question. Kingiwe? So
can you see it now?
Yes, I can see it on my screen. I hope others can also see on the screen. And I'm seeing that people are very quickly responding. Already 33% have participated. To which gender do you most identify? To which gender identity do you most identify? So let's see. Okay, so I think the point, 80%, just waiting for the last few participants to respond to the question. Okay, maybe Kingiwe, I think we have received 83%. So I'm not sure if the results are visible on the screen of others.
Can you see?
I can see, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so we've received respondents. 24% of respondents are women, 5 men, and 1 non-conforming gender. So, as Louise said, the focus on women. So I'm very glad to see that there's high participation from women in this meeting. Thanks. I will then, let's go to the presentation. I'll start sharing the screen. Yeah, so I'm gonna give you a quick overview on the project. So this slide on your screen now tries to give you an overview of how the project is constituted or how we have conceptualized the project. On the far left, you see the project team comprising of our partners, South African Climate Action Network, who is a network body engaging with different civil society organizations on climate policy issues, Institute for Economic Justice, who come from a very strong research and policy research background, and also a focus on the justice dimension of climate change. And then WWF, we will be leading the project and providing the broad management of the project also. As part of the project, there are 4 stakeholders which we have identified: the social CSOs and as well as environmental CSOs. So you would see in the project team also, while WWF and SA are more along the lines of environmental CSOs, IEJ is more along the line of social CSOs. I see Sonia, you have your hand up. Do you want to come in now or later? Okay, maybe later. Then the other stakeholders are government, and as Louise also emphasized, youth and women. These are the 4 stakeholders. We have imagined at least 3 important structures through which we will be facilitating capacity building and coordination. The first being CSO Climate Action Secretariat, which we envisage more as a platform than wherein different civil societies and networks can come together for collaborative approaches. We would be identifying 3 thematic working groups to really focus on areas of strategic importance. And then there would be project steering committee, wherein we would reach out to different constituents and different stakeholders to provide guidance to the project. As mentioned at the onset, the project is funded by the European Union through its climate change program very generously. We've been able to raise 85% of the funding from the European Union. The project runs for 4 years, and Gender CC and 350.org are our project affiliates. So quickly, just to recapitulate, the objective of the project is to enable CSOs to engage as actors of governance in tackling climate change in South Africa. We would want, as an outcome, we want to see improved collaboration across CSOs, which is able to emphasize and articulate climate demands with clear linkages to cross-cutting issues, particularly those of gender equality, economic justice, but also human rights. And then the impact which we want to see in the long run, that climate equity is promoted, and that we not only see the development of ambitious policy, but also its implementation and accountability. The capacity building element is the compass which guides the overall project. It's the golden thread which runs throughout the project. We will be through the various project activities, we'll be enhancing capacity of South African civil society organizations. We also recognize that the environmental CSOs cannot operate in isolation, no matter how difficult or how challenging climate change as an issue is. We cannot just operate in isolation. We need to build bridges with social CSOs, with trade unions and wider youth constituency. And that's why we think that institutional capacity needs to be strengthened by means of coordinated action, by finding ways to build knowledge, but also sharing it in a way that it reaches wider audience, and ensuring that there's a wider participation in the policy processes. With that in mind, the strategic focus of the project is inclusion and empowerment of the youth. My colleague Innocentia will speak to that. and then mainstreaming gender equality, economic justice, and human rights, as I mentioned. So before I invite my colleague Thando to come in, maybe we can just quickly have the second question up on the screen. Can you give it?
Okay. My apologies.
Should I share on the screen? Maybe let me just share the result from the previous question that you can see. And then let me go to the, Klingeve, can you select the second question, please?
Yes, sorry, yesterday.
Yes.
There we go. Apologies.
Second question should be on your screen. This is just for us to get a sense of the distribution in terms of age and amongst the attendees. We'll have it for another 30 seconds. We have responses from 29 participants. We are awaiting responses from 6 more. 5 more seconds to go. Yeah. Thanks, Klingeve. You can end the poll and maybe share the results. So that's you have the results on your screen. 57% of participants belong to the what in South African Constitution is defined as youth. So yeah, so that's good to know. We'll stop sharing the screen and then I will start sharing the screen on my side. Again, Thando, floor is yours.
Thanks, Prabhat. Can you see me?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, colleagues. The name is Thando Lukuko. I am the coordinator of the South African Climate Action Network, a third partner in the project, the CAAP project. So I just wanted to talk specifically on cross-cutting civil society community, which also represents the first output, if you will, in the project. But just quickly before I start, next slide, Prabhat, is just to touch on SA CAN. So SA CAN is the South African Climate Action Network is the full name. We are currently representing about 14 civil society organizations, including community-based organizations in South Africa. We are the nodal office of CAN International, which is a network of 1,500 NGOs based in 130 countries. And with the main objective of driving collective and sustainable action to fight against climate crisis and achieve social and racial justice. The following bullet points just touch on the strategic objectives of CAN International over the next few years. The first one being centering people and climate impacts, which is very much what it is we're going to be discussing today. The second one is ending fossil fuels. Transformative National Climate Action Plan speaks mostly to the nationally determined contributions that countries are putting forth for COP this year. And multilateral action advocacy just touches more on SA or Climate Action Network's historic experience in engaging in multilateral spaces, including COPs. And then lastly, again, for the purpose of this topic, we also focus strongly on building power through movements. So just to touch on then the objective, outcome, and impact. So the objective is to build a strong cross-cutting community, which includes social partners and also supporting enhanced climate change ambition, implementation, and accountability. The outcome is for coordinating the different civil society, which will be represented within the project, including other stakeholders, namely your labor, government, youth organizations, and any other partners who would have come on board through the project as well, particularly to enhance the national engagement, or the engagement rather, on climate policy nationally. And the impact we're expecting to achieve with this is to have improved participation of civil society in climate change governance, and ideally enhanced climate policy ambition, implementation, and accountability. The key challenges that we've identified and addressed in our concept note and or rather our proposal and this project is the following. The culture and tradition of social activism. As stated by my previous colleagues, there are only a small number of organizations currently engaged in the climate discourse, including at policy level. The fragmented and inadequately capacitated civil society. This not only speaks to the environmental CSOs in the room, but more broadly, civil society organizations more broadly, particularly those who may not have climate change as the main focus of their work, but do engage with it as a tangent to the work they're currently doing. The CSO's inability to be able to counterbalance the voices of vested interests, particularly in mitigation. As again, that was a point that was touched on by Louise, so I won't go into detail on that one. And then to overcome the dichotomy between development and climate objectives. This has been one that is, we continuously see it play out. And again, we're hoping through the intervention of this particular project that it will be able to address the challenges, particularly developmental challenges that South Africa is currently facing. Improve the state's institutional capacity for enhanced ambition, implementation, and accountability. Of course, we know that we always hear the words that South Africa has got great ability to put together plans, but the implementation seems to be lacking, and by virtue of that, accountability as well. So part of our plan is to then work with the state, not against the state, so that we might also improve their ability, or rather their capacity to enhance their ambition. And then build strong relationships with youth groups, social CSOs, and unions. Because currently as they stand, there are some fragments which exist in between those groups. Just to touch on then the key activities and key outputs. The first activities would be to identify and engage with civil society organizations to build this community of implementers, if you will, in South Africa. We will be hosting an inaugural and also for the subsequent years of the project as well, strategic workshops to develop engagement strategies that will help civil society organizations participate in the different climate policy processes. Of course, as touched on by Prabhat, we will be establishing the Climate Action Secretariat, who Hlengiwe is the current secretariat. We're not necessarily planning to do this in isolation. This is intended definitely to be built together as a collaborative effort. And one of the key things is this home, if you will, for us to be able to come together, and then through which we will be doing much of this work. And then every year we'll be putting together intergenerational dialogues as part of annual stock taking workshop. Because again, youth being a very critical stakeholder in this project, we need to create an active environment where we can discuss across generations as to what is being done and what more can be done to address the challenge of climate change. The following outputs then are also envisaged. Of course, the CCAS will have regular strategic and implementation plans that are functional. We'll have a charter of objectives and a governance documents and processes in place for the membership, including an annual report, a coordination mechanism between the several partners that we're going to have on the project, including an implementation dashboard, particularly to address the conversations which will be taking place under the thematic working groups. Also, just to note that the thematic working groups aren't necessarily for us to decide what they are, but it's to be decided upon by those parties who will be participating in the process, including then TORs and other structures which are important to that function. And then lastly, of course, the capacity building material, as capacity building is a key component of the work. We will be producing materials and disseminating some of that through webinars and workshops and so on over the coming years of the project. Yeah, let me end it here for now. Thanks, Prabhat.
Thanks, Thando. And I could see that the future youth really wanted to jump in the conversation. And thanks for their contribution. And that's just to add, I mean, Thando elaborated on SACAN, but the idea of CCAS is that SACAN and other networks operating in the country can find common ground where they can present the united front. So we are very glad to have representation from Climate Justice Coalition Steering Committee member Francina as one of the guest speakers. She will be sharing her views on this shortly. Moving on, I would like to invite my colleague Innocentia to speak on the second part of the project on the Youth Climate Champions. Innocentia, you have the floor.
Thanks, Prabhat. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Innocentia Modau. I'm the Youth Climate Champions Coordinator. I'm going to give a brief overview of the youth program. So currently, there is a low participation of youth in climate policy processes, and this could be because of various reasons. Some of them including the lack of access to policy processes and particularly policy formulation. And there's also an issue of limited access to resources, knowledge, and expertise of the youth to participate in the necessary climate policy formulation processes. So the children and youth of today are the ones that are going to be affected the worst by climate change in future. And that is why we think it's crucial to involve them to participate in this climate change policy processes. The target group for the program is youth that are aged between the ages of 14 and 35, and they will be made up of a 50-50 split of youth that are already involved in climate policy space, but then also involving those who are interested in entering the space. Next slide, please, Prabhat. So the main objective of the program is to empower a cohort of youth to become climate champions in order for them to engage strongly with climate action, and also just to participate more in this in climate change formulation processes. And the other objective is to capacitate the youth, and in order for them to become climate change activists of the future, and also policy advocates. And this will be done through a range of activities that I will touch on in the next slide, which will help motivate and encourage them to participate more in future. And also to provide knowledge to the youth, training, necessary trainings, mentorship, and access to policy participation. And the main output of the program is to have an improved participation of youth in climate policy processes and implementation. Next slide, please. So the main activities of the program will be to establish the youth program, and then so the main activity of the program will be to establish the YCC program, the Youth Climate Change Program, and this will we will hold as a launch event similar to this one, where we'll invite different youth groups and youth activists, and so the event will be covered through social media to get participation from youth. And then the other activity is to establish a Youth Climate Champion Steering Committee, which will be made up of youth leaders and specialist youth facilitators. And some of the roles of the steering committee will be to co-design the climate bootcamp programs that I will touch on a little bit later, and to help with the call for participation for the bootcamps. And the members of the steering committee, we're hoping to invite youth leaders as well as youth facilitators. And so that would help with in terms of with co-designing the program. And some of the other activity will be to develop a youth climate champions podcast series, which we are hoping to develop with the youth, with the participating youth, and hoping to have at least 24 episodes that will be developed and hosted by the youth on a monthly basis. And each episode will focus on a different climate issue. And would also another activity will be to organize social media training for the wider youth. And so the key activity of the program is to host annual boot camps from the year 2022. And the boot camps are designed to empower and train youth leaders, and focusing on those from low-income communities, in order to ensure that they confidently participate in climate policy processes in future, and also for them to be involved. And also will be the participants of so there will be a public call for youth call for bootcamp participants, and hoping to invite youth leaders on an annual basis. And 75% of them will be from low-income communities, and also trying to maintain a gender balance of 50-50 between youth that are already involved in climate spaces, as I've mentioned, and also that are interested in entering the climate space. And the bootcamp will be run on the bootcamp will run in the upcoming years with 1 week of online preparation, but also 1 week of in-person meetings where the trainings will be taking place. And another activity will be to employ 6 youth champions for an internship program, where they will participate in different climate activism and advocacy work, and also help with running, with writing in blogs, sending out social media information to the youth. And they would also play a role of being secretariat for the Youth Climate Champion Steering Committee. And also through the program, we're hoping to develop training material on climate policy, politics, and from there we'll be developing webinars, reading materials, presentations, and also we'll be hosting a youth climate, a youth parliament that will be attended by the youth that we are targeting. And the next slide, I think is that the last slide, Prabhat? I think that's the last slide.
Yes.
So, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. So, thanks. You can
Thanks, sorry for that. Thanks for that exciting overview, and also just to underline the point about co-designing of these bootcamp and the programs, I would strongly encourage the youth in the audience to get in touch with Innocentia on how best they could contribute and guide us in designing a program that serves their needs best. Thanks. May I now invite my colleague Sonia from Institute for Economic Justice. Sonia, floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks, Prabhat. And thanks everyone for joining today. I'm just going to keep my video off because the network is a bit shoddy today. I hope you can hear me clearly though. My name is Sonia Phalatse. I am a researcher and economist at the Institute for Economic Justice. A little background about the IEJ. We are an economics think tank that focuses primarily on progressive economic research for policymakers and of course various social partners. Our work focuses on a number of issues and themes, particularly relevant to this particular project, such as in climate justice, feminist economics, budget justice, human rights, just to name a few. And in this exciting project with SACAN and WWF, our role is really to complement their community building efforts with kind of research capacity building. And our objective is to mainstream climate research that foregrounds cross-cutting issues and shows how these should be translated into climate policy demands. This is also to incorporate kind of the social demands of climate change, such as gender and inequality, and articulate the implications of climate change for our economies, and show how climate policies are kind of either hindering or supporting better alternatives. So really our objective is to center evidence-based research on climate change that directly incorporates important themes that have a gender analysis or gender lens, and incorporates a human rights-based approach to economic justice, which I'll talk about in the next slide. So yes, just to talk a little bit about the main research themes that we will be researching. Of course, we're talking about climate justice and thinking about how we articulate what this means, and being clear about who benefits from climate policies, elevating kind of alternatives from below, and very strong bend towards empowering youth voices. And of course, understanding that climate justice is not effective without economic justice. Understanding that climate justice really intersects with and reinforces economic justice. And our aim is to explore kind of the economic conditions that are required to achieve climate justice or a just recovery from this particular moment. And so various economic issues such as climate financing, kind of energy concerns, and of course, as Thando referenced, the role of the state will also be kind of researched and analyzed and understood. And of course, a very strong gender justice focus, which has also been spoken about. Gender equality, as we know, is a central element of climate and economic justice. We know that women and girls are and will be and will continue to be more vulnerable to the effects of climate change and environmental degradation more broadly. And so we intend on kind of grappling with what policy interventions that incorporate a gender lens can be used in this particular project. And lastly, having a human rights-based approach to climate justice and economic justice. And our view is that climate justice should be the fulfillment of human rights kind of in the face of continued environmental degradation. And so we are focusing on using a human rights-based approach to kind of hold corporations, policymakers, and of course, governments accountable. In terms of the key activities and outputs, we have an exciting lineup of various outputs, a lineup of webinars, kind of events, public discussions, in the coming years, that we, will elevate the research we're doing in collaboration with social partners. So drawing on published research and additional local evidence, the actionable contextualized results for the South African context in particular. So we will use both qualitative and quantitative approaches to conduct rigorous research that is policy relevant and employs participatory research methods that empower target groups, particularly the youth. And some of the outputs include things like climate change toolkits to demystify climate scientific knowledge, and to enable civil society and broader public to understand climate policy and climate processes that are underway. Excuse me. And in addition, articulate strategies for policy interventions and advocacy. We also have a number of research outputs that will use various media platforms, which include things like policy briefs, infographics, explanatory videos. And lastly, we can't have these research outputs without stakeholder engagements. Thando spoke about the importance of intergenerational dialogues, just in terms of the stakeholder engagements, it's also important to have these conversations with kind of broader public, the broader public, so including other mediums such as, webinar panels, debates, as key platforms to share ideas and ways of tackling the climate crisis. So it's going to be an exciting few years, and we look forward to an exciting and no doubt challenging next few years. And I'm particularly looking forward to collaborating and building solidarity and co-creating alternatives with everyone on the call today. Thank you.
Thanks, Sonia. Thanks for the intervention. And yeah, I think IEJ brings a very strong research impetus into this project, which and the emphasis on demystifying science would be an important cog in the overall scheme of things. And maybe just to then summarize, so this is how we, as a project team, this is how we oversee these three presentations or thematic work these three outputs will be carrying. So we have a project management team at the center, which keeps an eye on how things are connecting, things are on time, etc. But then what Thando presented forms a part of the first output, which is cross-cutting civil society community. What Innocentia presented is what is the second output on youth climate champions. And what Sonia presented is on mainstreaming the cross-cutting issues, very important issues of gender equality, climate equity, and right-based approaches in national climate policies. And they feed into each other, and then they strengthen each other. So that's the overall view of the project. And I would end it there. Just to re-emphasize the finding from the latest IPCC report that human influence on climate change is unequivocal, unprecedented, and irreversible. So there is no time for denial, delay, or diversion. It's the action now. We need to act now, and we need to hold the power to account.